Welcome to the GateDrop podcast. GateDrop.com, giving you the jump in motocross news.
GateDrop.com podcast. This is going to be a busy one, Andy. I'm Jonathan McCready. Andy McKinstry has joined me again. I'm with MXGP, AMS Supercross, a couple of takeouts there, and a brutal MX Nationals at Fatcat to talk about. That was a busy weekend in motocross and Supercross, Andy.
Absolutely. The busier, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, good weekends racing around the globe, really. I enjoyed it all. So we're going from a weekend flat out with next week, not a whole lot happening. So I enjoyed it.
No, I think the Irish Motocross Championship might be the main event next weekend. Right, let's start with the elephant in the room, I guess, and the entries for Argentina. All in all, it probably didn't work out too bad unless you're a member of Team Husqvarna, where 3 of your 4 riders got injured. And that's always the danger whenever you have a less than stellar, I guess, depth in terms of entries compared to normal. Yes, the top 15, more or less, from both classes went. And I know that's how it used to be actually in the 90s. You hear a lot of complaining about there's only 15 or whatever going to these overseas races, but actually back then, it was only the top 15 that got going to the overseas races as well. But the difference was then points only went down to 15th. Now the points go down to 20th. So from my end, it really then should be the top 20 that get to go. Ideally, you would want more than that, obviously, even the top 25 in the championship. But I think in front, it's going to look better for their product if at least minimum the top 20 here in the championship are those that are healthy, get to go. And then at least you have, once the locals come, you have over the 20, but you have over the point scoring number. I know we did have that in Argentina with a lot of the locals, but it was still really only the top 15 main championship regulars. To me, it would make it better if it was 20, and at least then you're getting a full first to 20th right up to 1 point for that 20th of MXGP regulars. And then it kind of shows the depth a bit better overseas for riders and fans watching, because a lot of it, saw the crowds in Argentina fantastic. So it shows that a world championship has to be global. But for those fans to see more of the top stars, I mean, riders like Calvin Vlanderen weren't able to go, which was a bit of a shame. Alex Lupino as well. So the depth, even the racing, despite some good names not being there, the racing was still really good. I think that underlines just how good MXGP is. But for me, if you were sending the top 20 there with expenses paid, it would make a lot more sense.
Well, first and foremost, I've got to be honest, when I seen the entry list, I wasn't looking forward to Argentina. I think probably in terms of recent flyaway GPs, that's probably the worst entry list there's been. But, there is factors coming into it. There's guys injured that they can't do much about, and this, that, and the other. They have went to Argentina before, and the entry list has been a lot better than that, I would say. But, the problem is people are very negative. They see the numbers and then they say, this is crap, this isn't a world championship. Now, I do understand that to an extent, but, you don't base the whole world championship just in one round in Argentina, where traditionally, even if you go back to the 80s and 90s, they struggle to get 20 there anyway. But what I would say is in front need to start paying teams to go, and they're stuck in a bit of a situation is, how do they go about that if they do it? Ideally, I think they should pay the private teams to go. But then if they do that, the factory teams are all going to turn around and go, well, how long? What about us? Without us, you wouldn't have a race. So they can't really just pay the private teams and then not pay the factory teams. And then you can't really expect them to pay the full expenses for all the factory teams and the privateer teams as well. So there needs to be a bit of a middle ground there, but they definitely do need to do something to improve it. And especially this year with already quite a big injury list. Usually they would maybe get away with just the factory riders and a couple of privateer bikes. But, with the way the injuries have been this year, they needed a bit more. They needed some more private bikes, and even like Lupino didn't go, and he's a factory rider. So it didn't look great this year, but they do need to start, I think, paying, and especially whose idea to put Oman as the last round. I mean, there could be 4 or 5 riders at that. So I'm hoping
I would vote already for Leerop to be the last round after watching Ivan Van Erp go on a 250 round there. That just reminds you how amazing that track is. When you're at home and you've hurlings, you're going to have a big crowd there. It's easy access for anyone within Europe, even from North America, that wants to go to a sort of legendary sand track. it sort of ticks all the boxes. And I think as well, if the championship does go to the last round, although right now that might not happen with Tim Geiser's riding, but if it does, then the winner gets all those fans and gets that atmosphere. We saw how it worked at Mantova last year. It was sensational.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is with the Europe, they can maybe only use it once or twice a year because at the minute there's permit issues from what I believe. So I think at the moment having a GP there is very unlikely, but I think the hope is maybe they're starting to use it more and more now, hopefully, as the years go on, because they couldn't use it at all there for a few years. So at least they've used it there for an ONK Dutch Championship. There's talk it might be back on the Dutch Masters Championship, maybe if not this year, because I know Oz is in a bit of danger there because they've got even bigger issues with their permits. If not this year, then maybe next year, the year after, and then maybe in a couple of years' time, hopefully we can look at it for an MXGP. But I think it's a wee bit too early for that yet. But absolutely, I would definitely welcome it back on the calendar. Best track in the world, in my opinion, and actually, it's on my bucket list to go there someday.
Yeah, it's a fantastic track. But even anywhere within Europe, really, for the last round, for just rider access, fans, the guy that wins the World Championship, and maybe in both classes if it comes down to the end. I don't know if Oman will have the same atmosphere or intensity. Now, we don't know, obviously. We're speculating maybe in a negative fashion. It could be fantastic, but for me, I think it's better if the championship ends in Europe where most of the teams are based, and a lot of fans from a lot of different countries can still give it that international atmosphere, especially if it's a big shootout like it was last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to have flyways, I always think it's good to have them maybe the first three, especially if you're starting the season early. So maybe Oman, maybe the starter as the second round in February or March would be fine, as long as I mentioned you find some middle ground, you give finances to the team so some of the private teams can actually go to the races. And then, like I mentioned, I was not excited for Argentina, but actually once you seen the fans were out in full force and free practice. So I was actually glad they went, and I hope they continue to go because the track's amazing. The atmosphere is unbelievable. All they really need is to have 25 elite riders and you're flying. It would be a success. I still do think in terms of the racing and, you know, the show they put on, it was still a success, I think. But just the lack of numbers was just a bit disappointing for me behind the gate. That was the only thing that was a bit disappointing. But like I say, hopefully a bit of common sense can be used and they can try and fund these teams to go in the future.
I think it underlines why it does need to go to these countries on different continents, because A, it is a World Championship, but B, there's a lot of people follow the World Championship for all around the world, and they deserve to see these riders in person. Argentina was a great example of a lot of fans on a great track, although a slightly vicious track in another way. But definitely the racing turned out pretty well. And as you mentioned there, maybe they have the flyaway races early in the season. That would probably help with the weather in Europe as well. You look at MotoGP, they tend to do the flyaway as F1 as well. I mean, New Zealand and Australia is a long way away, but their weather's kind of, I think, winter coming into autumn in February, March. Those two countries would be great to start the year, and big motocross countries. They're obviously quite focused on AMS, so to me it would be good to get the MXGP riders there. Argentina, the likes of that, to start the World Championship and then come back maybe by April, end of March, whenever the weather's hopefully getting better at the European side of the world. Something like that, it would maybe be viable as well, but we'll leave the politics to the people that know a lot more than us, and I think we'll just concentrate on the racing. And I'm not sure where to start. You start with Tim Geiser winning his third race in a row, Maxime Renaux winning his first moto in MXGP, or do you start with Jorge Prado not getting into the top three in either moto, but still finishing third? Who for you is the biggest talking point there? Maybe Maxime Renaux.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Renaux because he's been very good at the opening two rounds, and I don't know, I think people must be sleeping or not actually watching the racing to give the guy credit. He started the season fantastic, and he's just won a moto in MXGP, his fifth attempt of asking as an MXGP rookie. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. And from my understanding is, after Mantova, he dislocated his shoulder. So even more impressive. Really good.
He did allude to the fact that he wasn't 100% fit as well after he won that moto. So that would tally up with your what you heard about his shoulder.
Absolutely. And I think what that'll do is for his confidence is very good. The way he won the first moto, okay, we all know Tim Geiger was quickest, but the quickest rider might not always win a race. And Maxime Renault, he never really he made a couple little small mistakes, but everyone was, because the track was quite sketchy. And he really impressed me in that penultimate lap, because he upped his pace, and on the penultimate lap, he was actually a tenth of a second quicker than Geiger. So Geiger didn't gain at all that lap, and I think that was the lap that actually won him it. And like I say, mentally, very, very impressed. He was just focusing on what he was doing, not really too worried about Geiger, which is the right way to do it. But, it's easier said than done when you can hear the bike behind you. And the way they put it away from third and fourth was pretty phenomenal for Maxime Renault to do that. It's such an early stages of his MXGP career. So I think he'll take a lot of confidence from that. And I just hope he can keep getting good starts. But the one thing I would say about him is, even when he doesn't get great starts, he's able to work his way through the pack to get either second or third. So really, really impressive start to the season. And I hope he can keep this up. And I hope some people actually can wake up and see what he's doing.
Yeah, and as you said, the first moto was really impressive to me. I know some people thought the first moto was boring, but I thought it was anything but. You had Paul Jonas out leading initially, while we're on the subject of Paul Jonas, that was a pretty phenomenal weekend he had, aside from the crash there. But the speed he had to win the qualifier, he showed the speed again in that first moto. I would have been interested to see if he'd the fitness and the pace to last the last 10 minutes. I was also wondering with Renault, with that shoulder, if he would have that as well. But he had Tim Geiger right on him, right on his back wheel. And as you said, the pressure didn't affect him one bit. It was actually Tim making the odd wee mistake here and there as Maxime upped the pace in those last two laps. So for me, that was a really exciting race. I think if you name Maxime Renault, Jet Lawrence, and you name Tim Geiger, Eli Tomac, and them National next year for Jet's 450 rookie season, you had that exact race with an Adamson Cirillo leading and going down. I think everyone would be saying what a great and exciting race that was. But for some reason, if you change the names to World Championship riders, people just don't seem to get as excited in certain spaces, which is a bit of a shame, really, because as you say, what Maxime Renault was doing this year, up to second in the championship, don't forget, ahead of Jorge Prado, he's positioning himself as the guy to challenge Tim Geiger along with Jorge Prado. And one mistake from Tim Geiger, Maxime Renault is going to be right there. But as you also mentioned, the starts, Tim is nailing these starts. And even though Renault was really impressive in that second moto to come through to second, you just can't give Tim Geiger 4 or 5 places ahead of you and think you're going to chase him down with the form he's in at the minute, because the thing Tim's doing, he's controlling everything. If he gets the start, he's able to win. He puts the pressure on the guy if he can't win, and he's taking seconds. His damage limitation's really, really good. Jorge Prado's won 2 races, but in all the other races, he's finished outside the top 3. And that's really where the points gap's coming from Tim Geiger. Complete control, complete mental control, and a lot of raw speed, and he's getting the job done every week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's pretty clear that at the minute, Geiger is the fastest rider in this championship. But one thing I would say is it's quite surprising to me that he's actually only won half the motos. He's only won 3 motos out of 6, but he's seen the bigger picture, and he's won all 3 overall so far. And it's looking like he's going to be a hard man to beat in terms of, who's going to be the first rider to win an overall, take an overall away from him. Renault was close, but that start let him down in the second moto. And even though Geiger has only won half the motos, he's got a 17 points lead in the championship now. So he's had a fantastic start to the season, really, and he'll want to continue in this fashion. And probably the next thing he'll target is to go 1-1 and dominate a GP, and that'll increase his confidence even more then.
Yeah. Last year, though, he started off on fire as well. And then he had, you wouldn't quite say it was a dip. He was still riding well, but he wasn't getting those moto wins. So we could almost go too early on Tim Geiger and say he's kind of in the box seat for this championship already. I'm maybe tempted to give it another 3 rounds or so just to see if he can continue this form. Unlike maybe last year where he had a relative dip for somebody of his ability. But for Maxime Renault and especially Jorge Prado, who will come on to now, when it comes to Portugal in just under 2 weeks, you feel they're going to have to start taking the wins off Tim Geiger because the points are starting to accumulate. And Jorge Prado isn't even getting the consistent hole shots. He got 1 hole shot out of 3 in Argentina. For me, he never looked comfortable even on the bike, you could tell with his style, it was almost like he just didn't trust the ground. We saw how unpredictable, as it were, the ground was. It looked loamy, but it was almost like hard pack underneath soil. Very choppy, almost no traction in some places and big loamy berms in others. Horgrou just never looked comfortable. A very fast track as well. Horgrou isn't really the guy to kind of hang it out and ride the edge. Maybe Renault and Tim are a wee bit better at that. But certainly Prado wasn't his usual self. And after the first 2 rounds, I thought by round 3, Prado will continue to elevate his level and sort of hit 100% soon. That didn't happen in Argentina. He lost more points. He even lost third to a very fast Ruben Fernandez in the second moto. And for me, it makes Portugal an even bigger round for Jorge Prado to try and wrestle a bit of momentum away from Tim Geiger.
Yeah, just on Prado, I mean, it's pretty clear from the 2 rounds, he wasn't riding at the same level as it was last year. And I felt that was okay because obviously he's got a new bike. He said himself he felt a bit rusty before Matty Basin. He only had one international race coming into it. So I felt that was okay. But I have to say, I didn't see this coming whatsoever. And not only was he not riding very well, I thought he made some very strange decisions, which aren't very typical of Prado. You know, in that second moto, I don't know what he was doing whenever Renault got past him. You know, he tried to go outside whenever he should have just went inside and let Renault go outside because no one was passing there anyway. And then on the last lap, he completely switched off and let Ruben Fernandez past him. Like, Prado was the rider you least expect to switch off in that situation.
People behind him, isn't he?
And also, he doesn't usually switch off. You know, he doesn't usually let people get close, especially on the last lap. So a very strange GP all around, really, for Prado. Not only was he not riding well, but some strange decisions and getting caught out, which is not like him. So I think he'll just want to forget that GP happened, to be honest. And hopefully in Portugal, he can come out swinging, and we can see, even if he rides like he did at the first couple of rounds, he still won 2 motos from 4, which wasn't too bad. But hopefully we can see the Jorge Prado from last year soon, because I think he's going to have to go to that level if he's going to get himself back into this championship contention.
I think that the positive was that he still ended up on the podium, which makes it 3 podiums as far as I can remember from the first 3 rounds, which in theory is actually quite good. Generally, the mantra is get on the podium every round and you won't be far away from the World Championship. But the problem is Tim Geiger's going 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 every week. And that's just accumulating these points on his rivals. Maxime Renault, he's actually been relatively consistent as well on the podium every round in terms of the top 3 in the moto, except for the crash he had at the second moto in Matterley Basin. And even that's now looking to be, that was quite costly for him. So Tim's not leaving a margin for anyone else to make mistakes. And that's kind of the problem. He's almost doing what Jeffrey Hurlings would do in the past and just go win or be second, win or be second. And it means his rivals can't really afford anything negative to happen whatsoever. The margin's so small and it really puts the pressure on everyone else whenever the championship leader's that kind of ruthless and consistent.
Absolutely. He's managing it really well, like you say, first or second every moto, and that's hard to beat over the course of a season. And I know you touched on it earlier that last year you had a little bit of a dip after the first 3 or 4 rounds, and I do agree with you, but I don't think it'll be the same this year because firstly, the level isn't as high with, Hurlings and Geiger being injured. And secondly, I think whenever Hurlings isn't there, I think we touched on this in the last podcast, Geiger, in my opinion, is a bit of a different rider. I think mentally he knows he has those other guys beat, and worst case scenario, he'll come up to second or third, and with this points gap he already has, that's fine. The only thing is he has got a crash in him. But I think if he can escape the next 2 or 3 rounds without a big crash, I'd be surprised if he doesn't increase his points lead, to be honest. But I'm looking forward to Fevre and Hurlings joining the party now, and hopefully we'll see some more different winners, let's say.
Yeah, I think Renault and Prado maybe need to risk crashing themselves, almost to try and put Tim in that position where he might crash. It's probably the one guy that has the speed to be able to do that, but even if he does come back, as we talked about before, he's probably going to be so far out of the championship that Tim will be able to let him go in a way. So that might not work in Renault or Prado's favour. He might actually get in between them for the championship. But I think there's a lot of movement still to go. Renault's, for me, is only going to get quicker. He's going to have a big confidence boost from Argentina. He wasn't even fully fit, and I think he's the guy to keep an eye on. But Jorge Prado too, I mean, you'd almost say he's probably at 85% of his potential at the minute, and he's still third in the championship. He's still on the podium. And yes, he has a bit of work to do in terms of finding that raw pace and even starts again on a consistent basis, but you certainly can't rule him out once he gets going. Prado should be up there with Tim Geiser regularly, but as you said, it's getting to the point where they might start having to hope Tim Geiser starts making mistakes. But let's move on to Paul Jonas. Did you expect him to be that fast in Argentina? I expected him to be good, but I didn't expect him to be up there at a winning race pace. He was really, really impressive for me.
Fully fit, I wouldn't be surprised. But
Exactly.
The fact he's rode twice in 2 or 3 weeks, very surprised. Really, really good. And you were sort of waiting for him to tire out in that qualifying race, but it just didn't happen. He looked great. And I think in the first moto, if he hadn't had his crash, I don't think he would have got tired because he just looked to be in the zone and he looked to have a comfortable gap. And okay, Geiser, might have forced his way through in Renault, then he might have caught him, but I think he would have been good for at least a second, but he looked really, really good out in front. It's just a shame about his crashing, but I think he'll be really delighted with his race pace. And for PJ now, it's just important to get these laps in at the practice track now, and the more races under his belt, he should get better and better. This guy has a lot of potential. I think me and you are pretty clear on that, but something always seems to happen, whether it's injury or a crash or something, but hopefully he can stay injury free this year, and I do believe he'll win. He has it in him to win a couple of GPs, no doubt about it.
It's actually pretty frustrating, almost in a way, seeing how fast he is, because you just feel that if he hadn't had that arm issue at the start of the season, that he would have been on this pace from round one and possibly making himself one of those title contenders with Renault and Prado. We said last year that he has the potential, the speed and the talent to become one of those title contenders, at least in terms of speed, and be among that Tim Geiser, Jorge Prado battle. I think he proved it there in Argentina that he has the stuff to do it. But again, kind of a wee bit classic Paul Jonas. There's always seems to be trouble along the way, and he's having to battle back from that. In terms of the championship, it never quite reflects just how well he's riding, but he's certainly riding fantastic at the minute. And to come out, as you say, straight away with that pace just shows how talented he is, and also mentally strong to be able to come unintimidated, knowing he hasn't had the best preparation, to be able to run up front and win that qualifying heat. Really impressive too from a mental side.
Absolutely, really, really impressive. And maybe, everything he's been through at the start of the season, maybe that took the pressure off, doing no expectations, because he looked like he was just enjoying it leading at the front. And sometimes that can make all the difference when you haven't got that pressure on your shoulders. So hopefully he can keep riding like that and not put himself under too much pressure, because I think he'll know he should be a front runner. He has a talent. He's a former MX2 world champion, and he has a talent and the speed and everything else. He just needs to stay out of trouble and deliver. But hopefully he can keep riding like that and just keep continuing to improve, and we can see him right at the sharp end.
Glenn Codenhoff was consistent, 5th overall, almost in contrast to the Thomas Kjær Olsen. You think of him as consistent, but he was riding very well in that first moto, again riding with a lot of intensity, but then it looked like crashing the second one. Maybe Sear ended up in that drama as well. He DNF'd the second race. The normally very consistent Jeremy Sear, so that was very rare for him, but he had a good first race as well, and it was kind of Glenn Codenhoff that kind of came through all that to end up nabbing that 5th overall. But Jeremy Sear and Thomas Kjær Olsen were very fast on that pace of Prado, maybe even faster than Prado, even Olsen, but they just couldn't get the results in that second moto to really show the level they were riding at. But for Thomas Kjær Olsen, especially, very encouraging. 2 weeks in a row, he's been riding really, really well, and like the old Thomas Kjær Olsen from MX2.
Yeah, just on Codenhoff, firstly, I feel like with that second moto ride, there might be light at the end of the tunnel now. We've seen him at the front a lot this year, but sadly for him, he's dropped back quite a bit after like 15 or 20 minutes for whatever reason. But in that second moto, he actually was able to pass riders, and he came through to 6th in the end. So that's a very positive moto for him after a tough start to the season. So hopefully he can build on that now, because we all know that Goldenhoff can be right at the front if he gets himself sorted out. And TKO, just like you said, it's nice to see him ride with a bit of aggression again. And you're right, I think him and Sear touched in the second moto. Think Sear sort of hit, obviously no intention at all. It was first lap madness, but I think he got the jump wrong and hit Olsen and took Olsen out. So that was bad luck. But Olsen can be happy with with his riding now. We were expecting some wow moments last year. It never really happened, but already this year, I think in terms of sheer speed, he's a lot closer to that top 5, which is encouraging.
Tim Geiger was carrying the weight of Honda on his shoulders last year, and in some ways it was a bit unlucky that it was such an intense and pressurized season with so many riders and with the championship, because Tim had that on his own all year, really, with the injury to Mitch Evans. This year, it's completely different. Tim is obviously the team leader and the championship leader, but Ruben Fernandez and Mitch Evans. Fernandez really fast yet again, had a somewhat bizarre crash. The bike just seemed to the front, just seemed to tuck on him on that dip with the bumps while he was leading race 1. A wee bit of a Fernandez moment there almost, but I don't even know if he did too much wrong. I think it was just that sort of track caught him out, which was a bit unlucky. But second race, he showed what he could really do. Nabbing third off Prado, really impressive. But also Mitch Evans, this guy's really impressing me mentally and also speed-wise. Every round he seems to make big progress. 8th overall, but a really good ride in that second moto. Wasn't far off Fernandez's pace for a while. Obviously, he's only going to get better fitness, more confidence, but mentally to come back and kind of believe you're still that good and just get in amongst those guys in that top 6 and run that pace. Really impressive for him. And I wonder if that almost takes a wee bit of pressure off Tim as well, because he has these 2 fast riders, both on Hondas, and maybe Mitch Evans, when he sees Ruben Fernandez in front of him, feels he shouldn't be beating me. I'm the one that's on the HRC factory Honda as well. So for Honda, 3 riders in the top 8. They have to be very, very happy with the season so far, because everything's going pretty much perfectly.
Well, it's a lot better than last year anyway, when poor Tim had no help. But anyway, I mean, Ruben Fernandez, I agree with you, actually. You know, he does tend to get carried away, and maybe sometimes it would be his fault from getting in that situation. But I think you're right. I think the track just caught him out, because that was a sketchy area and quite a lot of riders were dropping like flies in that part of the racetrack. So a bit unlucky to go down when he was leading. But the second moto, I mean, if you had told me before the season Ruben Fernandez would pass Jorge Prado to finish third in a moto by round 3, I think I'd have probably laughed at you. But here we are. Really, really impressive performance. Fernandez, the best Spaniard in that second moto. Really good progress, and I think you can see he's adapting to the bike every week, so he should continue to get better. And Mitch Evans, I mean, this guy was lying on the sofa for a year and a half, all sorts of injuries.
I thought his career was over at some point.
He was told he might not ride a bike again, and here we are, 3 rounds in, and he's just finished 8th overall MXGP. Deserves a lot of respect, that, and I think he'll maybe have surprised himself as well, especially when you look at where he was at the first round.
Exactly, yeah.
The progress has been unbelievable, really. So onwards and upwards, hopefully for him. And if he can get back to the level he was at, you know, he was good in MX2, but that first year in MXGP, before I think he got injured, it looked like he could have a future in this class as maybe one of the top guys. So if he can get back to the level he was at before, he could be another elite rider in this class, which is only good for the sport.
Another guy that was quietly impressive for me was Yuri Teixeira. Not a lot of buzz about Yuri Teixeira these days. He's doing his own thing, own bike, kind of a privateer effort. But to go top 10, and he was running a strong pace, both motos, beating some good riders. I think you have to give a tip of the cap to Yuri Teixeira. I think this year is going a lot better than last year. And he seems to have found some extra pace, and he's looking more like the Yuri Teixeira that was riding in MX2. A lot of confidence, a lot of pace this year.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, fair play to him for travelling to Argentina to ride. You know, he's got his own team, his own setup, and he doesn't even race all the Euro rounds, because last year a lot of the German championships collided, and he has a contract to ride those to Charles. So it was good to see him turn up first and foremost, and for him to go 9-9, very, very good. Privateer setup, 9th overall, very, very good day's work for him, and he'll just be hoping to keep plugging away and getting top 10 overalls. Another rider that I have to take my hat off to is Jeremy Van Horvik. He's doing it for the old man.
He's really good.
Fifth in the MXGP World Championship standings at the moment on the beta. Very, very impressive for the Belgian. Hopefully he can maintain this. It almost looks like to me as if he's just going back to his roots and just trying to have fun out there. And it's obviously paying off.
It's near like when he first came into the 450 class, he just rode.
Yeah.
And on the Yamaha, he had some great results as well. And he looks like he's riding with freedom, but he's also riding with confidence in that bike. They've obviously made steps again, and they've only had 3 rounds this season and 1 full season last year, and the bike's more than competitive. Jeremy looks very, very comfortable. And Alex Lupino, you mentioned he wasn't there. He's probably getting a bit frustrated because he just hasn't had much luck. He wasn't in Argentina. He didn't score any points in Britain. Italy wasn't even that easy for him. He's probably looking at it going, this bike is good. Jeremy's flying. I need to be able to get these more consistent results and let me at it. But certainly for Beta and for the future to attract more riders, it's really good. But Jeremy Van Horbeck, 5th overall, it's probably better than he could ever have expected.
Oh, that was a cracker. Absolute cracker. Rounds of applause for Johnny.
Very unique, that.
But yeah, very good, very good. I thought you were going to take over there, but
no,
yeah,
I thought
very,
you were
very
give
good.
your...
Well, yeah, I've already praised him enough now, but yeah, very, very good. 7-7 for
clearly.
We'll see if he can finish the season in the top 5 in the World Championship. If he can, that would be unbelievable. Hopefully, he sticks around next year if he keeps riding at this level.
Yeah, he's almost like he's been reinvigorated and found, as you said, found that old pace and just enjoying it, and the speed and results coming. Here, Tim Geiser, happy rider, fast rider, and clearly Jeremy Van Horbeck is very, very happy right now because the starts are good, and he's battling with legitimate guys every week and making passes on them as well. So super, super impressive for Jeremy Van Horbeck and also Beta as a company.
Yeah, I do have a sneaky suspicion he thinks this could be his last year, so this is possibly why he's riding with that freedom. You don't know when it'll end, but you know, hopefully he proved himself. He can still be at the front, and hopefully he gets a wee extension for Beta, because it would be tough for them to sign somebody as experienced, and you know, if they go for a younger guy, somebody that's already as quick as him, so even if he stays around for 1 more year, it'd be good for both parties, I think, if he can maintain this level.
Just for the knowledge, even with the testing of the bike and progression of the bike, even if he was a kind of a test rider and did some wildcard races next year, you don't know, but certainly he's proven to be a big asset for Beta in terms of bike development, but also in terms of exposure of just how fast this bike can go at the pinnacle of motocross. Anyone else you want to give a mention to? Quite a relatively tough day for Jed Beaton, Alberto Ferraro and Ben Watson. Maybe not the pace you would have expected from all 3. I know Ferraro had been really impressive the first 2.
Yeah,
he didn't quite get it.
Ferraro was struggling with diarrhea, I think, so not
Nobody's
great.
At their dinner.
Yeah, and Beaton hit a post in Mantova and hurt his shoulder, so difficult GP, especially with that track as well. You want to be 100% round there because very intense, fast, and then quite a lot of bumps to catch out as well. So not ideal. Just for those 2 to get points probably was the goal, and that's what they managed to do. Yeah,
I think Watson's been a bit banged up as well. So again, just struggling on essentially, and that was a track where I know Beaton did go down with Brand Bogers, who we should mention. Really unlucky for him. He's been riding so well this year. He was quick again on the Saturday. Just a real shame he wasn't able to show that pace in the races. And now he's injured with a dislocated shoulder. And that's maybe the most annoying thing about motocross. These guys work their way back from injuries, finally show the potential of always believed they've had. And then one random thing, it might not even be your fault, as we saw with Liam Everts and even Gianluca Facchetti and MX2 that we'll get on to. And suddenly you can be back at the hospital again, having to rehab and try and find that form back again. So certainly not an easy sport, and you have to applaud the progress Boger's been made in the last 12 months, but hopefully the shoulder isn't too bad. We can see him back on the bike soon and back to the form he's been riding with this year.
Absolutely. If you're Dutch, I mean, last year was unbelievable, winning the MXGP World title with Jeffrey Herlings, but this year everything that's gone wrong, I think, has went wrong. So the last man standing is Glenn Codenhoff, and he's not setting the world on fire, so the Dutchies aren't having a great time of it. But like you say, hopefully Bodgers will be on the mend soon, and hopefully we can see him in Portugal. I do feel sorry for him because I think Bodgers is a really underrated rider, actually, but you know, at HRC Honda he got a hard time, but you know, he was always injured and very, very difficult. And this year he was just starting to show what he could really do, his true potential, I would say. 5th, he was coming into this as fifth in the world, and then that happened, so he's dropped down the pecking order again. But hopefully he's not too bad. I'm going to see him back at the sharp end soon.
Staying with Husqvarna, transitioning to MX2, it certainly didn't get any better for the team there. Rowan Van Der Merstag, a big ugly crash in the waves. I think he's maybe broke his collarbone. He was out for the weekend, but Kai de Wolf was still looking good, looking fast. Got away, was running third, was staying with Gertz and Tom Vial, and then somehow, unbelievably, both he and Simon Langenfelder, three on third and fourth, crashed at exactly the same time, but at like a second apart in terms of where the track was. Langenfelder went down in the corner, and then just on that roller jump, De Wolf looked like he was kind of trying to scrub, but the bike didn't clip the jump the way I was expecting, and he just ended up in free fall and down very, very hard. And it was a real shame because he'd been pretty consistent all year. Looked like he was riding with his head as well. He was riding fast, but it didn't ever look like he was taking the necessary risks. So to have that crash happen kind of wrecks his championship. He was hanging in there for a world title, really, to be honest. And he's never really got that momentum where you were just expecting him to start to try and really push for moto wins. It might have actually happened in Argentina, but unfortunately we never got the chance to see, and it wasn't nice seeing him lying there, not able to move. And luckily no one hit him because the flagging was not good over that mound. And
I was shouting at the computer.
Yeah, what it was Paul Mallon. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. It was pretty scary because if somebody just come over the jump, it wouldn't have been their fault and nailed Kai. He could have been even more badly injured. So Marshall in there certainly needs to be improved in Argentina in those sort of situations.
Absolutely. It was the part of the track you really didn't want to crash because it was so fast there. And like you say, if somebody had hit him at that speed, it's not even worth thinking about. But the good news is it could have been a lot worse. I know he took a blow to the head and his wrist is a little bit sore, but all being well, his wrist will be good. And if his wrist is good, we should see him back at Portugal. So it could have been a lot worse because a high-speed crashes like that usually don't end well. And as we seen with Rowan Van Der Merstag, he had a high-speed crash as well. He was already riding in pain. So really, and from his initial crash in Mantova, there was nothing he could have done about it after Vial took Langenfelder out and he had nowhere to go. So he's not having a particularly fortunate season so far either, but I think, he's broke his collarbone and possibly a wrist injury, so I wouldn't expect to see him in Portugal, unfortunately, but hopefully he can heal up soon and we'll see him back at the front because I feel like he's another rider that did have good speed this year along with the Wolf, the maybe challenge the Vial and Gert show, but we'll have to wait a bit longer yet probably.
Continuing with the unfortunate injury trend and sort of didn't look good in the lineup for Moto2, the restart in MX2. But Gianluca Fatcat had been riding really, really well all weekend. He kind of felt it was finally fine. Shown glimpses as soon as he's been on this KTM, but he was really starting to put it together, not just in time qualifying, but also racing. Then he had that big crash in the second moto. Again, not his fault. I think somebody else. They got a bit offline into the side of him, and he had a massive crash that it had to be red flagged, the race. Luckily, I think he just has I say in quotation marks, but compared to what it looked like, he said it was a small fracture in his wrist, potentially some broken ribs or fractured ribs. And aside from that, he looks fairly positive about the whole thing. That could have been a lot worse as well. So thankfully, he isn't any more injured. But Gianluca Fatcat always seems to be going this, I've got injured, now I need to get back going again. And then every time he looks like you're starting to see his full potential, like we did this weekend, he takes a knock back again and has to rebuild. So very frustrating for him, but it was nice to see that the speed he has. He's been a name on the radar for a long time, but it's never really turned into results and just looked like he was starting to get those results in MX2 and then that happened. So again, we were like Brian Bogers, you have to feel pretty sorry for him.
Absolutely. A tough one to take. I mean, in qualifying, you're looking at the lap times going, Fatcat third? What the flip? So that was very, very impressive. He can obviously go very quick for one lap. And I feel like this year he's good for 20 minutes and then he starts to drop back, which is better than the past. In the past, he's only really had 2 or 3 sprint laps in him. So definitely showing a lot of, showing a lot of progress there, which is great to see really, because that car crash he was in, how many years are we going back now? But that really did affect him physically. So it's nice to see him on the mend from that, and hopefully he can get on the mend from his latest setback and we can see him behind the start gate as soon as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And he was the wee kid that was on a 65 jumping about at the start line that I think everyone in motocross across the globe has seen. So to see his progress, despite, as you mentioned, the car crash, which was really, really bad and really halted his progress as a motocross rider, to come back from that and other injuries to still be competitive in MX2. That's why it's such a shame to see this latest setback. Just sort of looked like he was really grabbing some some momentum. But momentum-wise, it was Tom Vial and Jago Gertz. They had a lot of momentum around that track. Extremely fast, extremely impressive. And Jago, for me, I know he didn't win the second moto, but mentally, to me, he's a different rider this year. He followed Tom Vial in race 1, unusually decisive with the pass. This is where I think he's really made a step forward. He looks like he's got the blinkers on this year. He knew what he wanted to do, executed immediately, pulled a pace that Tom couldn't stay with, and won the moto. Second moto was almost rules reverse. Tom Vial, who know he's very smart, but to me, he's low-key ruthless, and he hates losing more than I think it looks like whenever you watch him ride, because he's so precise. He doesn't like losing. He doesn't like giving anybody any momentum. He wants everyone to think he's the fastest, and he actually admitted he was really determined to win that second moto. He was the one that followed Jago. He made the move in Jago this time, and he got the win with Gertz. Probably, and I would sort of agree, taking it a bit easier at the very end, the last couple of laps, because that track was sketchy, and he's the one leading the World Championship. You certainly don't want to have a big crash like Rowan Van Der Merstag did, or Kyle Wolf, and ruin your own World Championship aspirations. 47 points each for Vial and Gertz there with the class of the field, but both probably in the opposite motos were really, really impressive. Gertz very focused, no mistakes really, but Tom Vial just showed his class again in that second moto. He had a tough Mantova, a big crash again in Argentina, but he still come back with the overall win and probably quite a vital second moto win for the momentum in his championship.
Yeah, Vial really, really needed that second moto win just to stop Gertz's momentum, because, like you say, Gertz this year at the moment does look to be the better rider. In the first moto, I think Gertz played it really perfectly. You know, he just sat there, and in his head, he obviously knew he was quicker because he let the gap get out to 3.5 seconds. But I mean, it took him 2 laps, and he was right on Vial. So mentally, I think that was very good for Gertz. And I've got to say, I actually thought Vial made a bit of a error in the second moto because he passed Gertz quite early, and I thought Gertz was going to catch him and pass him again. But I think Gertz got blisters in the hand then, and then just settled for the second. So in the end, Vial didn't make the error, and you could see in Vial's riding, he was a lot more determined in the second moto. He did not want to lose that moto, and he wanted to win and have the overall with it. So in Vial's head, that's a very big moto win. Even though Gertz beat him in the first one, he hasn't lost any championship points. So Vial's next target will be go 1-1 and try and chip into this championship lead. But Vial won't be panicking too much yet about the championship yet, I think, because last year, I mean, he was way, way, way back, over 100 points back at one stage, and he got up. Didn't he end up finishing second or third? And he wasn't that far off them in the end. So
yeah,
definitely not be panicking too much yet. But it's going to be intriguing because he still can't let Gertz get this momentum and go 1-1 next week in Portugal.
No, and those two almost look like they're elevating themselves to a new level. If Argentina's anything to go by, yes, Kyle Wolf had that crash, so that's sort of taken him out, and Simon Langenfelder had that crash at the same time. He got the whole shot then the second race, but he was clearly riding a bit battered and a bit bruised. He didn't have his normal pace. He kind of a bit of damage limitation, I guess, for 5th, 6th he ended up. So not too bad really, but in terms of points, it was a bit of a dip in regards to the amount that he lost to Jago Gertz over 2023, I think it was. So a bit of a downer, the first kind of real tough spot for Simon Langenfelder in terms of points. It'll be interesting that he has a week off, thankfully, to get to feel a bit better, and hopefully he'll be back to what looks to be his normal level, which is up front in Portugal. But on the podium was Mikel Harrop, and a lot of people might be surprised by that. And in terms of consistency, yes, but Harrop's always had speed. We maybe didn't see as much of that last year. He was actually relatively more consistent, although he didn't have the greatest starts. This year, it looks like the speed and consistency starting to come together. He's getting better starts, not always amazing, but he's certainly closer to the front pack. And he rode really, really well in both motos. Was it the first moto he had a crash and he still came back through? Yeah. Second moto, it's almost a pity he didn't get away on third, because it would have been interested to see how long he'd have been able to stay with Vial and Gertz. He certainly had a very good pace, but obviously starting with those two and then running the full 30 minutes is a different thing with that intensity, and a race went up for grabs. But Mikel Harrop, really impressive. And this is probably kind of where he should be, but the sticks in Kawasaki is suiting him. And we're starting to see maybe the maturity and the potential of Mikel Harrop in 2022.
Yeah, just to start with Langenfelder, considering he's been, really only fully fit for Matterley after getting hit in the back, I think he's actually doing quite well, only to be a point off Gertz, or a point off Vial, on only 27 off Gertz. I think he's actually dealt with the damage limitation quite well there, but for him, it's just important to get back to not being in any pain, and hopefully we can see him right at the front again. But he seems to be getting involved in quite a lot of chaos this week, this last couple of GPs.
But I'm not really his fault, well, bar the first crash. But still.
Exactly. And Miguel Harap, second career podium, really, really, really good. I think if there was an award for who passed the most amount of riders this weekend, it would probably be Harap. Seemed like he was passing riders left, right, and centre. And in that second moto, whenever he got into third, he was going the same pace as Vial and Gertz for about 5 or 10 minutes, I think. So I feel like his first 10 minutes, his speed, it's still quite good, but it's not at the speed of Vial and Gertz. But after 10 minutes, he seems to up it. I'm not sure if that's just down to increasing his intensity or because the track's getting rougher. But his late race pace is certainly really good, and really good weekend for him to get third overall. Last year, I think it was just important for him just to stay injury-free because he had so many injuries the year before that. So hopefully this year he can do the same again, injury-free, and he can keep riding at this level. Very, very impressive.
Kevin Horgrou ended up 10th overall, but really he should have been in that battle for the podium with Harap. His pace yet again was really, really impressive. And I don't think I expect him to be this consistently fast. Now, by fast, I mean on that top 3, top 5 level. I did expect him to be around top 10 pace, but he's much better than that. And he's consistently much better than that. And Argentina was maybe his best so far. But again, a couple of crashes ruined what should have been a podium threat and maybe even a podium for Kevin Horgrou. He's really adjusted well to this F&H Kawasaki. They've clearly got the bike running well as well. And it's turning into a pretty good signing for them and a great deal for Horgrou. It's just a shame that the results didn't match his speed this weekend because he was really, really impressive.
Absolutely. I credit to the F&H Kawasaki team too. I think last year, their bike around the track was good, but not one of the riders could start. Whether the bike's improved or just Horgrou's really light and he's just a good starter. But I think it is getting better. The bike's a lot better out of the gate this year too. So it's been good to see him up at the front from the very start in these motos. And I agree with you. I thought Horgrou might have been around 10th, but he's definitely exceeded my expectations. The results actually don't do him justice, like you say. The first moto, he had third in the bag. I'm not sure what happened to him. It must have been with 2 to go. He must have had a wee small crash to drop him to 5th. And then the second moto, another crash. Just a big shame, really. But hopefully he can cut these crashes out. Felt like last year was his first year. He was not having as many crashes, but obviously this year riding on a different intensity, probably a lot more excited to be at the front of the MX2 pack. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully once he gets used to it, he can cut out the mistakes. They're not even big crashes either. He just keeps washing the front by the looks of it. Yeah, maybe it's just concentration, but hopefully he can put that behind him and then he can actually start getting the results that are doing him justice. And the results already have exceeded expectations. So it goes to show he would have even been doing a lot better if he could keep it in 2 wheels. So, but very, very encouraging.
It's almost like he's in a rush when he gets to the leading positions that he's like, oh my goodness, I'm that fast. I can keep going and try and get Gertz or Viala, whoever it is. And it's almost like he just needs to stay calm and believe that he is that fast. He doesn't need to do everything in 2 laps. He's got the pace. He can run that pace, relax, and everything will come from there. But I guess whenever you're up at front, and whether he expected it or not, he's there, and you kind of just get in a hurry probably to try and get these results and show how fast you are. And oh my goodness, I'm right there. I can see them. I think I can catch Vial, Gertz, or De Wolf, or whoever it is. But I think maybe just a wee bit more composure in those early laps, believing that he is that pace. He doesn't need to reel everybody in and pass them at once. That'll probably help, but it's probably just experience. He hasn't a lot of experience of running in that top 5, top 3. And sometimes he's passing his way to get into there as well. So he's obviously feeling the momentum and the adrenaline at that point. But I think it's just a learning experience. And I expect the more he's riding up there and the more he's starting up there, the better and more consistent his laps are going to become.
Sure, I think that's the name of the game for Kevin Horgrou, although I would like to know what happened to him at the end of the first moto because the TV actually missed it. I actually thought he had finished third and it wasn't until I seen the results up he finished fifth. So, and that wouldn't have really been down to what you say, because he had a nice gap over Gordon and Harb. So maybe a concentration thing. Could have just been caught out by the track. Who knows? He wasn't the only one to be caught out by the track this weekend, that's for sure. A lot of big crashes, and his are actually all pretty minor compared to some of them. So he's healthy. He's still 8th in the championship, which is very, very good. And if he can keep it in two wheels, like we say, he might go up instead of down, which is very encouraging.
Matteo Guadagnini showed improvement, 4th overall, but the second moto maybe didn't end as well as you thought it was maybe going to go at the start, but certainly improvement for him. And Conrad Mewes, 5th overall, definitely worth his money, or whoever's money was paying for it, to go to Argentina. A good haul of points for him. For a while, I thought he was going to get Isaac Gifting in that first moto, and then Conrad didn't get the start in the second, although Gifting ended up with a bad start or a crash or something, and that one didn't go his way. But certainly when they are on track, Gifting and Mewes seem to find each other quite a lot, which is quite entertaining considering considering Mewes used to ride for that team last year. So I think there's a bit of a rivalry there, even going back to the British Championship last weekend. But certainly positive for Mewes. I thought his first moto was really good. He almost couldn't get the pass when he had the momentum. And then he got passed by Harrop and I think someone else, if you can remember. And that sort of killed his momentum in that one. But a 4th, or maybe was it even a 3rd? 4th was certainly on the cards for him. In the first one, if he was able to pull the trigger and make the pass there. And again, second moto didn't quite get the start to get on that pace, but still 5th overall. Good for him and hopefully a confidence booster. But again, I wouldn't quite say he was on the level of what he was the weekend before in the UK, but certainly closer to that level at least.
Firstly, just on Guadagnini, he really needed that difficult start to the season. And that 3rd and 4th kind of came from nowhere in terms of if you just looked at this season, because he hadn't showed that pace at all, really. So I think that'll be a very big confidence booster. And we can't forget how good this guy is. He was sensational last year. Not sure what issues he's had at the beginning of this year, but it's nice to see him run at the front again. Has a lot of talent, and it would be good to see him riding at the level he showed last year, because if he can, he'll not be far away. And on Mewes, could probably say he was lucky to finish 5th overall, because he only went 6-9 in the motos, but still a solid weekend, and you can't complain at coming out with 5th overall. Definitely making steps in the right direction, but I still feel like he has more to offer, and especially if he can ride like he can in the UK. Håkan
Fredriksson was probably a bit disappointing for me. I thought he would have been all guns blazing around there. Pretty fast and aggressive rider, but he always seems to be at the back end of all the fast guys, and only 11th overall in a field that was a bit depleted. A wee bit surprised at that, but
I think Fredriksson, that track would have been too fast for him. I said that as soon as I seen it, because he's really good when it gets really rough and technical. And while the track was sketchy, I don't think the high speed tracks really suit him, to be honest. And plus, he's weighed down quite a bit as well.
Yeah, well, easy on there.
Well, he's a big guy compared to some of those lighter guys, like, so he's at a disadvantage when it comes to, to a 4th, 5th gear flat out track.
Any more insults for Håkan Fredriksson?
I'm defending him, actually.
Sounds like it. Just on MX2, we lost Kai de Wolf, obviously lost Van der Merstag, Fatcat and Everts. We've also lost Thibaut Beneston, which is easy to forget. I think he'll be hopefully coming back soon, maybe even Portugal.
I think. Quite heard, but back on the bike a few weeks now, so hopefully Portugal.
He, if you remember back to last year, him and Guadagnini were kind of what Langenfelder and de Wolf were doing at the start of this year. So he's definitely going to be a big addition. But while we were talking about the depth and stuff, there's not much in front can do about injuries. And those were 2 good riders that were already injured, added to the fact that the 2 Husky guys got injured as well this weekend. So you were kind of down 4, especially by that second moto, which doesn't help either. But again, it's injuries. We would like MXGP with no hurlings in February. There isn't too much you can do about that. So it's important to bear that in mind. But whenever all these guys come back, whenever Everts is back from his broken finger, Beneston's back as well, and the 2 Husky riders, MX2 is gonna be pretty special. We saw in MXGP that most of the guys battling at the front, even in the heat race that Jonas won, it was 3 world champions out of 4, and that wasn't including Tim Geiser or Jeffrey Hurlings. So it just shows you the level that MX2 has and the great riders that it's creating. And certainly this year, once everybody's back, once all the entries are back to normal, there's going to be some great racing throughout the field again.
Absolutely. MX2 for me doesn't get the credit it deserves. Jet Lawrence gets a lot of hype, and that's rightly so. Jet Lawrence is incredible, really good rider, but Tom Vial or Diego Gert, it feels like they don't even get a tenth of that credit. And I would love to see them all race together, because I think people would be surprised at the pace Tom Vial and Diego Gert are going. Really, really impressive. And it's hard for even the MX2 riders behind them to run that pace, because they're going so fast. Corner speed and the technique they ride with is very, very impressive. But yeah, I'm looking for MX2. Actually, I've really enjoyed this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing the likes of Lagenfelder, De Wolf, and Van Der Merstag fully fit again, because I think we can close the gap down to the front too.
And Jed actually mentioned in a recent interview that it was Kai De Wolf that was one of the few people that could actually challenge him, and De Wolf was a year younger than him. So I think if you were dreaming of a scenario, it would be Jet Lawrence to come to the World Championship for a couple of rounds this year and take on Vial, Gertz, and Kai De Wolf. And I think maybe you add Simon Langenfelder with his current pace in when he's healthy. Those five would be setting a pretty impressive pace, I think. But sticking with Jet Lawrence, he had an impressive crash in the heat race in Supercross. Fortunately, he came back, but the depth in that 250 East class with injuries is not great at all. And he still managed to run down Kyle Chisholm, of all people, on a star Yamaha, which kind of tells you the scenario America are in right now with injuries and maybe depth of talent with young riders coming up. Jet Lawrence won that race. Did actually have a battle with Cameron McAdoo in the main event, but again, it was Jet that prevailed. And as I said before, aside from McAdoo, he doesn't really have any competition there, and he's by far the class of the field, which makes me think it's somewhat similar in the West Coast with Christian Craig dominating there, although he does have a bit of Hunter and Michael Moseman at times close. Is the 250 class now better to have a kind of one-class non-regional championship? Because it looks like if you get a couple injuries on either coast, the depth is not there, and it's a wee bit of a one-man show. For me, if you had both Lawrence brothers, Craig, the top 20, 22 best Supercross riders in the 250 class in America, you could afford a couple of injuries and the racing would still be pretty good and still quite deep. But at the minute, it's a bit of a one-man show in both classes almost.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. I've always thought the 250 class would be the way to go, but that just seems to be the tradition in America, and I don't see them changing it. But yeah, Jet's just too good, isn't he? It's going to take something outrageous, I think, for him not to win this title. One of the youngest riders in the class, but the maturity he has, I think you can tell his experience. He obviously started up racing in Australia, so he's got that experience. Then he went to Europe. He was riding against men, riders twice his age in the EMX 250 championship, riding rough, gnarly tracks, and now he's got the experience racing in America. So he's the complete package, really. And even though he's young, he's got a lot of experience, probably more experience than the majority of riders there, actually, because
and
he's
also Hunter as well,
all across the globe.
He's seen what Hunter's probably learned from Hunter.
Yeah, he's been a good guide
as well. So yeah,
he's been a good guide for him as well. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, really, really good, and I'm looking forward to the outdoors really in the 250s. To be honest, not a lot to say on the 250.
Well, I'm looking forward to the couple of combined races where we'll see
the combined. Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm waiting for.
I'm looking forward to that, but I'm kind of scared for that at the same time. Hope Jet just stays calm and doesn't get too excited.
Yeah, you immediately think if he's following Christian in the whoops, it could get a bit ropey, because Christian's probably the quickest rider in America in whoops, even on a 250. Right, let's go to 450s, and yet again, it's the Eli Tomac show in terms of the championship. But the big talking point was, I'm starting to feel sorry for Jason Anderson at this point. He seems to get knocked down more than he knocks other people down. That's the second time he's been knocked down with Justin Barcia. Last week, Malcolm Stewart took him out for just revenge, even though Anderson didn't actually hit anyone in his pass of Eli Tomac, and it was Tomac that hit Stewart, but Stewart got the red mist and wiped Anderson out. And then he had his own crash there last week. So it's all just completely unraveled from being 6 points behind Eli Tomac. The championship's well and truly over, and this was kind of the final nail in the coffin as he got nailed by Justin Barcia in a corner out of nowhere. If you're Jason Anderson, I mean, the gap Barcia had to make up whenever you saw Anderson land off the triple. Barcia was only really taken off. You wouldn't even imagine that he would just T-bone him like that. And the fact he apologised, even Ricky Carmichael wasn't buying that one. He put his hand up coming down the straight after he knocked Anderson off. I mean, Anderson's got bound to have a wee tally written down of people he owes something to now at this point. And with the championship gone, they might need mirrors themselves because Barcia might have one coming to him at this point.
Absolutely. Now, there's a lot of people saying Anderson left the door open, and I'm one of those people that usually say that, if there's a gap there, they're going to go for it. But I agree with you. Like, Anderson couldn't legislate for that because Barcia was so far behind. Barcia didn't even attempt to take the corner.
He didn't do the corner. He just ran straight on the straight.
So I do feel sorry for Anderson there. He's had a lot of bad luck this year, even with the takeouts. He had a DNF. So it's just all kind of going wrong for Anderson when it comes to the championship chase. And I think now I just want to stay out of trouble for a race. Is that possible? Do I think? I thought Barcia was on his best behaviour this year, so I suppose it was about time for him to do something like that. Just unfortunate for Jason Anderson, it had to be him at the end of it.
Yeah, it was. But although I'm saying that, I'm not sure he would dare do that to Tomac like that. Just out of nowhere, just T-bone into the side. And it was quite funny in the press conference. He basically said it wasn't really his fault. It was just a racing incident, and Anderson should have seen him coming. Now, he has been fined, I think, $3,000, if I remember. Yeah. And he got a 3-point penalty, but he got to keep second place, which is slightly confusing. I don't know how I feel about the penalty. I don't know if it's too harsh or if it's kind of about right. There seems to be a lot of differing opinions on that. But it probably means if you're Jason Anderson and you go for retribution now, you'll probably get the same penalty, which is a bit unfortunate because Malcolm Stewart took retribution on him and got away with it. They only got penalised for cutting the track. So there's a wee bit of inconsistency with the AMA's decision of takeouts and penalties, but it's not easy really to gauge, I suppose.
I think it depends. Like, I can see why, in my opinion, that Barcia takeout was the worst one of the season, probably worse than even Stewart's, because he didn't even intend to take the corner. So I can see why his punishment was, he got punished and Stewart didn't, to be honest, because it was so I think you'll get away with it as long as, there's a gap there, you try and take the corner and maybe the guy will hit you as you're sort of half block past him. You'll get away with something like that. But, if Anderson tries to do the same thing, he'll certainly not get away with it, no.
Yeah, and he's probably, although at this point he might just not even care anymore because it's been such a bad month.
On another note, do you think this is the best Eli Tomac we've ever seen at Supercross?
Absolutely. Maybe not any faster than his prime Kawasaki wins, but he looks more composed. He looks like he trusts the bike in every situation. He looks like he trusts himself in every situation, no matter how bad it gets. He's patient. And as the season goes on, it looks like he has the pace as well. And he's ticking every box right now. I'm actually quite excited to see how he does outdoors now as well.
Yeah, for me, like you say, in the Kawasaki days, maybe he would have weeks where he rode as quick as that, but then I don't think he was as good mentally back then. What's impressing me this year is mentally, it's almost like Geyser in MXGP. In his head, he's got all these riders beat. And Tomac, who's never really been like that in the past, I don't think, is starting to think like that. So very impressed with him mentally, and I'm in agreement with you. The outdoors could be interesting. Obviously, Dylan Fernandez was unbelievable last year, and I'm expecting him to be probably as good this year, but Tomac might come out swinging for the outdoors this year. It should be interesting between those two.
David Vuillemin heard that Tomac had maybe thought of retiring this year. That might be his last year, and also similar with Ken Roxon. But if you're Tomac and it is going this well, is he riding this well because this is his last year and he doesn't feel any pressure? Or if you're going this good, you could probably not really turn down another year because you're probably thinking this is my first year on the bike. It's probably going to get even better in 2023. I'm sure he'll get a big pay packet as well because he's going to look like he's going to get a Supercross championship bonus at least, and that'll help for his wage next year, I'm sure. It's hard to turn that down when you're riding so well. He actually said in an interview with Don Maeda on Swap Moto Live on press day before this weekend that he hasn't touched his bike since round 4. So I think that's an indication of just how comfortable he is in the Yamaha. Yeah. And 4 rounds of a new bike, and by round 4 you're not touching the bike. I think that just says just how comfortable he really feels this year.
Yeah, and how happy he is with everything. Yeah, and
he's very outgoing as well this year, on a personality level.
Yeah, I never really thought that. I just thought the change of teams. I put it down more to that because he looks so comfortable in the Yamaha. Obviously, at great days in the Kawasaki, but then 1 week he might be unbelievable, and then the next week in the Kawasaki he could be nowhere. Obviously, part of that was maybe down to mentally, but also maybe that could have been down to the bike or not having the right setup. So for me, it's just the change in teams, the change of atmosphere is probably the key, and I think he should stay on. I mean, if we go back 5 years ago, it looked like he might not win a Supercross title.
Yeah, he should have two.
If everything goes to plan, there should be two, and then why not go for a third? Why not? He's
Added
nothing
to
to
that,
lose now because he's already got two, and it looked like at one stage in his career he might not win any. So
added to that his win record, he could think this season he could surpass Ricky Carmichael and be the second winningest, as the Americans say, 450 rider in terms of individual main event wins, and almost a wee bit like Hurlings, you kind of feel Tomac deserves to be on that level. I think he's just past Reed, and he's Carmichael maybe next in the South. I think Carmichael's 50 and Stewart's or Tomac's on 42, 43. So definitely that's coming. And if he can get this second Supercross title, which I think he looks like doing now, he certainly deserves at least two, because for a couple of years there he was faster. The fastest guy. He was certainly faster than Ryan Dungey, but Dungey's consistency beat Eli Tomac's speed. And now I think Tomac looks like he knows how to be consistent and he knows how to be fast, especially on this Yamaha. So I think you have to say, well done, Eli Tomac. He's going to very much deserve his second championship. Hopefully nothing goes wrong, because at this point, it would be a real shame to see him not get the title with how well he's ridden.
Absolutely. Well, if he doesn't get it now, something drastic must happen, because he's riding really well. Like saying, mentally, he looks in a great place, and he's just, aside from maybe Anderson, who's getting caught in all sorts of drama, Tomac's definitely the fastest there. And it would be a shame to see him quit, actually. Hopefully he stays for another year.
Just stay away from Justin Barcia in a turn. You don't want him injuring you and costing you a title. Yeah. Some mad move. But yeah, Eli Tomac certainly really impressive this year, and without getting carried away, if Jeffrey Hurling just fit and Eli Tomac's fit, it could be a pretty exciting Redbud.
Oh, that's a long way down the line yet. The Dutch probably aren't even thinking about Redbud right now.
Dutch might not have a team if these people keep getting injured.
If it was next week, they'd be completely snookered if it was next week.
Americans are probably going, this is working out all right. Yeah. So hopefully the Dutch can get their team to challenge America at Redbud. We've got carried away there. We need to go back and back to Britain.
Calm you down.
Another very rough track, Fatcats. That track was brutal. It looked torturous. There's no way you'd ever want to ride around there. The wee Supermoto track in the background looked much more fun.
A lot more smooth anyway. It was an gnarly old man's track. Good to see. I think for a number of years, to be honest, I think the tracks in the UK haven't really been getting that rough. But I think when Gary Hockey's come in, they're running the 2-day formats now. A lot of racing on the Saturday, so even if they do level the track overnight, the bumps are still there underneath, so it doesn't take them as long to come through. And then obviously at this time of the year, the ground's very soft, so it doesn't take it long to get rough anyway. So good to see. And Josh Gilbert, wow, I mean, where did that come from?
He just smoked everybody. Looked like he was in the wrong series, and he should have been in Argentina the way he was riding.
Yeah, he was really, really impressed with it. To be honest, I'd never really seen it coming, because I mean, he was good at Cullen, but he wasn't. He wasn't
another level.
He was. Yeah, and it takes a good rider to pull away from Harry Koulas and be Harry Koulas that got in the sun. Yeah, exactly. So credit to him.
And he's
obviously had a good winter.
He looked at ease. Everyone else was kind of hitting the bumps. He seemed to be able to somehow still roll them and look really, really smooth and mistake free until he didn't make a mistake right at the end. But
yeah, I was about to say,
really, really impressive.
Yeah, really impressive. 2 corners to go though. On the first moto, he gave himself a bit of a scare, but he was that far ahead, it didn't even matter. Yeah, he was certainly the standout star. Sean Simpson, Harry Koulas kind of gritted their teeth and powered their way through. Was pretty good, but it did not look fun to ride. Lewis Hall was quite good on the 252 stroke. The MX2 guys, for power, I don't think power really mattered too much around there by the end. It was that rough. So the MX2 guys were pretty competitive, kind of from around 5th place in that 450. Martin Bard, a couple of good come from behind rides. He loves that going as well. So for the Northern Irish rider. And also sticking with Northern Irish riders, Cole McCulloch, really impressive 3rd overall for him in the 125 class. He's certainly going to be one to watch, not just from a Northern Irish perspective, but just generally in the UK. A lot of talent there, very young, straight off in 85. On the pace, maybe not quite of Charlie Heyman, but he's very, very talented, very fluid. To ride that track and beat the 250Fs the way he did, really, really, really good for him. And I'm excited to see his progression in the MX 125 as well as Ollie Colmurphy is doing more.
because those two look like they've got a lot of talent, especially Charlie Heyman. Certainly one to watch for Britain, and even international teams here are looking at a good young rider to come up. Charlie Heyman could be your guy.
Yeah, just on McCulloch, obviously, I think he broke his wrist, or he had an injury in the off-season and missed 5 or 6 weeks off the bike. So
the first round of the MX 125 he was supposed to do.
Yeah, and he's already on the pace. Obviously not of Charlie Heyman, but I mean, to be getting podiums and to be getting second, third, fourths consistently is already a really good start to the season. So looking forward to him making his EMX 125 debut at Arco de Trento now. But Charlie Heyman is one rider definitely to keep an eye on. He had a good start at the EMX 125 championship at Mallory. He's by far the best 125 rider in the UK. So hopefully he can improve by racing the MX 125 championship, and he could be the next big thing from England, hopefully to keep an eye on, because probably not too many coming up that you get really, really excited for. But certainly him and Ollie Colmer and Joe Brooks seemed to be the main three really breaking through at the minute.
Yeah, Heyman's a guy I think to keep an eye on in the MX 125, because obviously it's different riding there, more competitive, and riding in different countries is a lot to get used to. But if he can do that and show the pace he has in England, he's definitely going to open some eyes over there, hopefully, and probably Britain's biggest young star coming through. Certainly a good guy to keep an eye on. But that is everything, I think, wrapped up, Andy, unless there's something I've forgotten, because there was a lot of motocross dirt bike racing to watch over the weekend.
Not really. Just a shout out to Jeremy Saido, who impressed me in MX2 at Argentina. Forgot to mention him.
He was solid,
8th overall, 10-7. 14th in the championship, which is steady considering how many injuries he's had. So shout out to him. Keep it up.
Oh, I forgot to mention
how long you've
No, we're not. We forgot to mention Tommy Searle.
Oh yeah.
That didn't go well.
There's not much to say, is there?
Well, maybe. Well, there is if you're Dave Thorpe by the look of things. But Searle, the first lap of that first moto, his bike was like a bucking bronco out there. It did not look comfortable at all, and I'm not really surprised he got arm pumped, because the bike was just kicking him all roads. I don't know if it was set up or he just didn't quite have the rhythm, but I don't think I've seen Tommy Searle look like that on a bike in maybe ever that I've been watching him. And it's not that he can't ride Fatcat. He's rode there loads and he's usually pretty competitive. You know, if he's not riding just Gilbert speed, you expect him to even be 4th or 5th, even if you're saying he's not going to have the pace on not one of his best days for Harry Kulis or Sean Simpson. But to pull out of the first race with arm pump and crash race 2 and not really come through the field, that's a pretty big disaster, because it's almost the championship down the pan now already.
Yeah, bad day at the office, but if I was Tommy, I would just forget about it and move on. I mean, he went 1-1 at Cullum at the first round of the British Championship. He'll probably be back to winning way soon, so just forget that happened. If it does happen again, though, I'd be concerned.
Yeah, it was almost too random to be just out of. It was just so out of the blue. You think was there something else going on, or was he ill or something coming into it? Because it's almost was like it wasn't Tommy Searle on the bike. So I would imagine that's not going to last too long. Tommy's enough experience to turn things around as well. But in terms of the championship, not the ideal start after a 1-1, as you say, in the Revo British Championship the week before. But yes, I think that's everything. Not as much next weekend, and then again full speed ahead into World Championship action in Portugal, which I think you're heading out to. So you may bring your sunscreen, because your tan ability isn't great.
Well, I might take the rain over with me now. You wouldn't.
Matter to me, I'm not going there.
Could be a mud fest.
You can do what you want. It has been rain there in the past. Well, that track's quite good, but there isn't a lot of the restaurants. They don't always speak English at them. I remember I was at one in Garswanapol and all was there, and the chicken was a bit raw and you couldn't tell them not to fully cook it, and it was a bit awkward. So you can have a bit of luck trying to get your meat cooked right. So
sure, even if they speak English, they can't understand me anyway, the accent. So be all right.
Yeah, you're gonna have a good time there. Speaking to a French guy all weekend, he doesn't understand you either. So you're really just gonna be talking to yourself.
I'll just be shouting names out.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Harrop, there's Gertz, there's Vial. That's me happy.
You're just thinking about shirts, right? That's me. I'm off. I'll speak to you later.
Adios. Ciao.
None of those are.